On a bitter March dawn in 1782, a peaceful village stood silent beneath a gray Ohio sky. Children awoke to pray. Adults prepared harvest provisions. And then the door opened, and the living nightmare began. This is not a tale of battles and strategies, but of innocence betrayed. A community of faith in a land of war found itself in the crossfire of mistrust. What happened at Gnadenhütten changed the frontier forever.
Settlers of faith on the frontier.
In the late 1770s, deep in the Ohio country, a mission village called Gnadenhütten, Ohio, came to life. Founded by Christian Moravian missionaries and Lenape converts, the settlement embraced pacifism, faith, and the hope of new beginnings. The name itself, Huts of Grace, evoked sanctuary, not conflict. Families lived side by side, children learning hymns, adults farming corn, the community safe in their belief that God was with them, even on the frontier. They were neutral in a time of war. While British and American forces clashed, these Christian Indians refused to take sides. Their rifles were for hunting only. Their allegiance lay not with flags, but with faith. They trusted that their peaceful posture would protect them. They believed the woods and river around them held promise, not fear. The mission houses were modest, the gardens simple, but the spirit strong. Every morning brought the sunrise over marsh and pine. Every evening the songs of the faithful. And yet, beneath the quiet, lived tension. Outside the mission lay a world consumed by war, land disputes, raiding parties, and suspicion. To some settlers, the Lenape converts appeared alien. To some militia, neutral meant suspect. The seeds of tragedy were planted long before one icy morning in March. For this village of grace, misfortune loomed beyond horizon. And so begins our story of promise, faith, peace, and the forces that would shatter them.
Peaceful people in a storm of war.
The village of Gnadenhütten stood quietly on the banks of the Tuscarawas River. It was home to Moravian missionaries and converted Lenape, people of faith who embraced Christianity and pledged nonviolence. The name itself, meaning Huts of Grace, spoke of shelter, not conflict. They planted crops, learned hymns, lived by a mission of peace. But around them, the wider world was in upheaval. The American Revolutionary War raged. Frontiers were battlegrounds. Raiders swept through settlements. Native nations, British soldiers, American militia, all clashed in blur and blood. Gnadenhütten's residents sought no part in war. They were neutral. They refused to raise arms. They believed their faith would protect them. Yet their cruelty made them vulnerable. American settlers suspected them of aiding raids. British officers doubted their loyalties. Their harvest fields stood abandoned, their homes empty at times, and the threat of war pressed closer. In early 1782, the missionaries were forced from Gnadenhütten into what was called Captive Town. Many returned to gather crops and provisions, but returned into danger. The silence of the village belied the storm gathering beyond. They trusted in prayer. They trusted in one another. But the world outside trusted little. And thus the stage was set. Peaceful village, unarmed people, war-torn land. What happened next would tear faith and innocence asunder.
Deception and capture under snow.
At the break of March 8, 1782, The quiet mission village of Gnadenhütten stood still beneath heavy skies. Its residents, Christian Lenape and Moravian missionaries, believed their faith and neutrality would protect them. But militia led by David Williamson and other frontier men had other plans. After rounds of threats, they pledged safety and asked the villagers to surrender their weapons and walk into captivity on the promise of relocation and safety. But the promise was false. The villagers handed over their hunting rifles, tools of survival, not war, trusting the men before them. They were told to assemble in 2 buildings, one for men and one for women and children. Outside, the snow-cut trees rustled in the wind. Inside, the prisoners sang hymns. They prayed. They held each other close. They had only known peace. They were unarmed. Yet they found themselves in chains. The betrayal was absolute. Williamson's militia argued that the villagers had aided hostile raids on western Pennsylvania farms. The villagers denied the charge. They had remained neutral. But the militia's suspicion hardened into verdict. That night, in freezing skies, the Lenape slept in prayer, aware that the following day would bring something unimaginable. One boy hid under a floorboard. Another escaped by fleeing through the snow-clad woods. And so dawn broke not with song, but with horror. The captives, unarmed, Christian, innocent, were marched out of their homes, separated by sex, then methodically slain. The weapons they surrendered moments earlier were wielded for their doom. Betrayal gave way to massacre. The winter air seemed to hold its breath as the atrocity unfolded. As the village buildings rose in silent witness and the river flowed cold beside them, the implications spread far beyond this remote Ohio mission. The frontier war, always cruel, had claimed among its casualties not just combatants, but innocents. The trap was set, the deed done, and the wave of retaliation would soon roll forth.
A night of captivity, hymns before dawn.
The night of March 7 to 8, 1782, descended on the mission village of Gnadenhütten like a stillness before a storm. The Lenape Christian converts and their Moravian missionary guides were confined to 2 buildings, men in one, women and children in the other. They had been promised safety, a transfer, a new beginning. Instead, they locked the doors behind them and prayed. Inside those log walls, they sang hymns. They held hands. They prepared for death not by anger, but by faith. Outside, the snow-brushed fields were silent except for militia footsteps, boots crunching in frozen grass and pine needles. The rifles they'd laid aside, hunting guns, peaceful tools, were handed over in trust. They had nothing but songs and trust in the morning light. In the cold dark they waited. Some militiamen drank the communion wine that had been left behind. Others argued bitterly. Should they bring these captives to Fort Pitt or slaughter them here? The vote was taken, and the decision set. These praying men, women, children knew they had done nothing to merit death. Yet helplessness is not mercy. As the first pale rays of dawn touched the Tuscarawas River, the captives rose. Some brushed the snow from their clothing, others comforted children. They stepped into daylight still unarmed, still hopeful. But hope does not always guard. The trap was sprung. The massacre would begin.
After the smoke, memory, guilt, and retribution.
In the silent aftermath of March 8, 1782, the village of Gnadenhütten lay smoldering. 60 huts, home to Christian Lenape families and Moravian missionaries, stood charred. 90 innocent men, women, and children lay dead. The Pennsylvania militia had marched out of the fog of frontier war, blood on their hands. Some men opposed the killing but were overruled. Others joined willingly. Among the victims, non-combatants who had laid down their arms, trusting in a promise of safety. The betrayal ran deep. The massacre did not extinguish war, it fed it. Native nations, long wounded by colonial expansion and violence, saw the frontier's cruelty displayed in full. Retaliation followed. Many Lenape and their allies refused to seek peace with settlers who had broken solemn promises. The cycle of violence deepened. In time, settler society would attempt to memorialize the dead. At the massacre site, a monument stands, the poor defenseless ones, together bowed in prayer. Memories are complex, of faith, innocence, and a fundamental breakdown of trust. For the Christian Lenape community, the massacre marked a turning point. They were no longer safe in neutrality. They moved, rebuilt, but the wound would not heal easily. For American settlers, the event became a stain on frontier character, one that future generations would acknowledge but never fully redeem. The embers of that March morning still glow in the fields of Ohio, reminders of what happens when war treats the innocent as enemies. From that destruction rose memory, justice delayed, and a legacy of sorrow.
Wounds that echo in memory.
Decades after the massacre at Gnadenhütten Massacre, the frontier did not forget. The burned huts, the broken promises, the innocent gone, all left scars in the land and in conscience. For the Christian Lenape, loyalty to peace had brought betrayal. The trust they extended had been used against them. Many fled west or moved north into Canada. Their community was altered forever. Meanwhile, among American settlers and militia, the event was buried in frontier lore. Some condemned what happened as a stain on frontier character, a forceful phrase by a future president. Others ignored it. Historically, the conflict of 1782 rolled on, frontier raids, reprisals, land seizures. But Gnadenhütten stood as an extreme moment, a massacre of innocents under false pretense. The memory persisted in small ways. Missionaries kept journals. Lenape elders told stories. Surviving boys bore the weight of being the only witnesses. Monuments would rise. In the Ohio woods, a mound holds remains. A granite obelisk reads, "The poor defenseless ones, together bowed in prayer." Visitors come quietly. The river still flows. The trees still shade the spot once filled with song and terror. The crossroads of faith, war, innocence, and violence are visible in the landscape. The tragedy reminds us, when war spreads into neutral ground, when arms are laid down and allegiance assumed, protection is fragile. When distrust replaces dialogue, when vengeance stands in place of justice, the result is often the small and the defenseless. And in a frontier war, the margin between community and carnage is very thin. As we leave the memory of the massacre behind, we turn to the final scene, the question of legacy. How does a community, a nation, remember? What do we do with our dark hours? The chapter closes, but the work of reflection remains.
Reckoning and remembrance, the legacy of innocence lost.
Today the quiet fields near the Tuscarawas River hold a silence loud with memory. The village of Gnadenhütten in Ohio may no longer bustle, yet its story resonates. On March 8, 1782, some 90 unarmed Christian Lenape, the men, the women, the children, fell to a militia's guns. In the aftermath, the mission huts were burned. A community of peace was erased before dawn. The survivors were few. The massacre deepened mistrust on the frontier, fueling cycles of retaliation. Yet history also marked the site. A mound holds the remains of those slain. A granite obelisk bears the inscription, "The poor defenseless ones, together bowed in prayer." Every March 8th, visitors gather at the memorial to remember. The echo of the shotguns still lingers, not only in regret, but in commitment to never forget. Forget what happens when neutrality becomes vulnerability, when faith meets fear, when innocence is treated like enemy. As we gaze across the grass and snow of that Ohio valley, we must ask, what have we learned? Can a nation that once walked in boots of vengeance now walk in steps of justice and reconciliation? The past does not allow easy closure. The wound remains open. The story of Gnadenhütten gives us a mirror. It shows the high cost of war when it finds the unarmed. It shows the danger of distrust when cynicism replaces promise. It shows how remembrance can become a duty. And so we leave the village in the twilight of memory, its log cabins gone, its hymns silenced, but its legacy alive. The peace they sought still challenges us to stand for innocent life, to demand accountability, to honor every voice, even in the most remote frontier. In that commitment lies redemption. In that remembrance lies healing. We turn away from the site, but carry its lesson forward. Wrong done must be acknowledged. Wounds carry into tomorrow. And in the hushed vales of Ohio, the voices of the fallen still ask us, will you remember?